So this recipe uses both chicken breasts and chicken thighs. So the first step is to take the chicken thighs with the skin on and the bone in and season those with salt and then sear them in the pan. And I get a nice crisp skin. See that? Nice and crisp, and there's a nice amount of fat on the bottom. That's both from a little bit of olive oil that I poured in to start the saute process and from the chicken skin. Our aim is not to cook the thighs all the way through at this point in time. It's just to start some browning on the bottom of the pan, get the chicken skin brown, get the fat rendered, and then we have all of those nice brown bits on the bottom of the pan, right? And this is the beginning of our development of flavor in our chicken and dumpling recipe. So then we're going to add some mirepoix, which is a French term for carrots, onions, and celery, a little bit of salt, and I want to crank the heat up to high, and I want to continue to get this nice browning of these vegetables. You see that? Okay, that's good color browning. That's nice. It's not burnt, but it's nice and brown, right? The vegetables are nice and brown. So now we take this mixture right here, and we want to now take all of that yummy brown bits, all of that flavor that's on the bottom of the pan, and we want to harness it into our sauce. So we have to deglaze the pan. So I have some white wine. We're going to pour some white wine in here. You don't really need to measure, just enough to cover the bottom of the pan. We scrape up all those brown bits with our wooden spoon, and we reduce the wine by half. But really the main reason is to concentrate the flavor or the acid in the wine. So the wine in this recipe, and if you don't want to use wine, you can use a mixture of water and lemon juice, but something acidic, because what the wine does is as it reduces, it gets very bright, right? That acid comes forward, and that helps to balance the heaviness of the cream in the sauce and that, sort of the creamy sauce that we're going to make. We're already on our way to Cheater's chicken stock. We have the brown bits from the chicken, we have the white wine, so we're going to pour in chicken broth, a nice quality chicken broth product, low sodium, so that we are the ones controlling the salt in our dish, right? We want to make sure that it's not too salty. And then we add our chicken thighs that are only partially cooked. Remember, we didn't care if we were cooking them all the way through, right? We're adding those back into this broth, and we're going to let them finish cooking in here. Any liquid in the bowl, dump that right in, because that's all yummy flavor. So then we bring this to a simmer and let the chicken thighs cook, maybe 15 minutes. We really get great flavor in our chicken broth. You can imagine how flavorful now this little Cheater stock is, right? Once the chicken thighs cook in there. Once we're done cooking the thighs, we'll take them out, we'll let them cool a little bit, and then we'll just discard the skin and the bones, and we just have the meat that's shredded, okay? All right, so now what I have here in this pot here is I have our Cheater stock that I made earlier today, just so that we didn't have to sit and wait for that to simmer for 15 minutes. And so I strained it, and it's in this pot ready for us to go, okay? So your next step would be to begin to make your, to saute your vegetables and the chicken breasts and to make your roux. So we're going to start with 4 tablespoons of butter. This might seem like a lot to saute some chicken, but remember what we're doing is in this process we are also making our roux. Okay, we're making our thickening agent. You could use a really nice high quality frozen vegetable melange if you wanted to not take the time to chop all those vegetables. To this we're going to add the chopped chicken breast. Okay, chicken breast, boneless, skinless, that I just cut up. Really easy, 2 seconds, okay? So we put this in here and saute this as well. We'll increase the heat. Cold chicken in the pot really reduces the temperature, so I'm going to increase it to high and just start to saute this a little bit. As it gets, we're not looking for golden brown. You're going to spend at least 15 minutes with the lid on and the dumplings steaming. So you have plenty of time for the chicken to really cook, right? We just want to, so for my purposes, I would say don't spend the extra time completely cooking the chicken at this time. Just get it nicely, cooked on the outside, nice and white, and then When you add the broth, it continues to cook. When you steam the dumplings, it continues to cook. So the flour for the roux, like I said, equal parts fat and flour. You make a roux anytime you make gravy. Your fat can be anything. Okay, so I used butter in this case, but if you are a bacon fiend like me, you can use bacon fat. You can use any fat. You can use coconut oil. You can use an olive oil. It doesn't have to be butter. Any fat that you want. So I pour in the flour here. And we want to be ready with our stock, because what's going to happen is the flour is going to start to stick to the bottom of the pan a little bit, right? It's going to be coating the chicken, and then it's going to also start to stick to the bottom, and it's going to get a little, maybe it gets a little gluey and starts to brown a little bit, but don't panic. It's not that wet. You can see it's really not that wet, but I don't know if you can see that far away. I can see it's getting kind of, you see the spoon? It gets kind of gluey, right? Okay, so we just want to be aware, and we want to be ready with our stock. And it says in your recipe, it says whisk in, because it's very easy for lumps to form, you know, when you're adding the liquid to a roux. So I make a little hole in the center, and then I start to add a little bit of the broth. You can always thin out with more broth. It's harder to add a little bit more flour once you have the liquid in here. So I whisk to get a nice liquid state. Okay, now I'm taking my wooden spoon and I'm scraping all that flour that's on the bottom of the pot, because there's some stuck down there, right? We saw that. And I feel like it's getting a little bit thicker. I can see it getting a little thicker as it heats up. Don't panic if it's not thick right away. It has to come to a simmer, and it has to thicken. The flour has to, you know, sort of bloom, if you will, in the liquid. So it'll thicken as it heats up. At this point, I can add my chicken thighs that are completely cooked, right? I can pour that in. So then I add a little bit of the heavy cream, just about a half a cup, and bring this whole thing to a simmer. And at this point, you should probably taste it and see if it needs more salt. Our dumpling, we have the flour. I put in a little herb. I put in salt and baking powder. And then I have the butter that I've kept really nice and cold. That's key when making a pastry or a biscuit or a dough of any sort. You want the butter to be cold so that there can actually be nice little chunks of butter in the dough. First of all, we do have a chemical leavener in here, right? We have baking powder, which is definitely going to react with the temperature of the pot and to liquid. It reacts to both. That's why they call it double acting, because it reacts to both temperature in the oven or in the pot and to liquid. So, so I have baking powder in here, but the idea about the butter is that the butter actually helps with the flakiness as well. Because if you have all of those nice little pieces of butter in your dough, when the butter melts, either in the oven or in this pot, there's water in butter, right? So when the little pieces of butter melt, the water comes out, it creates steam, and it elevates, right? It makes that real flakiness. So we have kind of two angles of help in rising and making these really beautiful light dumplings. The baking powder for sure, and then the butter is the second leavening agent, if you will.
With your love of cream going up.
Why not use cream? Hell, you're right, Todd. Let's do it. This is not going to be a dough that you can, mold into biscuits, right? It's just going to be a looser dough. So I think I need a little bit more. See how it's kind of dry still? All right, and so now this is ready. I want you to take a look. I want to take a look at our filling, if you will. But you're going to get this foam on top. Do you see that foam on top? Now, this is another professional secret. You don't want to have this foam right here, even if you get a pea or two, right? You don't want to have this foam in your dish, even though it's going to be covered with biscuit dough. And what is the foam? The foam is just the protein from the chicken, that's floating to the top. The fat is the residual butter that didn't get worked into the flour. So, you know, whenever you're sauteing something and you're afraid to put in, oh, that's too much fat to saute and then I'm going to add liquid to it, the fat is not going to be absorbed. It's always going to float to the top. So you can always skim it off, right? So you're not really adding fat to the dish. What you do get is all of the delicious flavor from the fat. So never be afraid to cook with bacon fat or chicken with the skin on or things like that if you're going to be adding liquid to it, because it's just going to float to the top and you can skim it right off. You know, we have a pretty nice consistency. It's thick, but it's not too thick. I think it's perfect. I'm not going to add any more liquid to it. Okay, it's not gloppy. Do you see? It's not gloppy. We can't go gloppy. So if it's thicker than this when it's in your pot, thin it out with more cream or more stock, because you're not going to have enough moisture to steam the dumplings. So now what we'll do is going to take little dumplings. I'm going to try and make them small. What I would normally do is I would just make nice big ones. I would make like 6 or 8 big dumplings, but I'm going to try and make them small so that you all can taste one. And we just float them right on top. And now we're going to take the lid and cover it. Okay, and this is the time when the dumplings are steaming, and you cannot lift up the lid. I think the recipe says that. Don't lift up the lid. Don't let out any of that moisture. We want to keep all of that moisture in here. A nice heavy pot is really helpful so that the lid fits really well and you don't see, like, you know, steam billowing out. They're nice little individual dumplings. And the liquid now is a little bit thicker. Do you see? I don't know if you can really tell from back there. Like, it got a little bit thicker from the flour in the dumplings. And so that's exactly what we want. Good question. Do you have to serve this right away? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so you know, you can have everything made ahead of time. The dumpling mixture, you can have the all the dry ingredients and the butter worked in and in the refrigerator, right? And then right before you want to serve it, about 15 minutes before you want to serve it, mix the milk with the flour to make the dumplings. Because remember, that baking soda reacts with liquid. So the minute you add liquid, you're going to start to lose some of your leavening, right? So add the liquid right before you intend to steam the dumplings, cover it, 10 minutes for little, you know, 15 minutes for big dumplings, and then bring it right to the table. And I think it's gorgeous to serve in, you know, a pot like this.